I sit on a council of 13 people that take orders only from the Rothschild Tribunal in London, which they claim they take their orders directly from Lucifer.
I was the manager of Zodiac Productions, which Zodiac Productions, its name's been changed since then. I'm not even sure what they call it now, but it's the largest music conglomerate in the world. It owns RCA Records, Columbia Records, Motown Records, owns almost all the concert booking agencies in the United States. And that's not even the name of the company that owns it. The name of the company that owns it is Brenner Enterprises, and Brenner Enterprises is owned by Chase Manhattan. Chase Manhattan's owned by Standard Oil, and Standard Oil is owned by the Lords of London. You can track it all back. You kind of get the idea after a while. But I was the managing president of Zodiac Productions. It was one of my jobs as being one of these 13 people. Thus, I got to know many of the people who produce music and sing the music and play the music that you play. Now, one of the closest friends that I got during that time that I obtained was a man named David Crosby. Crosby, Still, Nash & Young. I saw David the day before Christmas last year, talked with him. I got him away from this witch that he had with him. He told her to go shopping. We were in West Hollywood, and I was witnessing around to people I knew. We went off in this store, and we started talking. I said, David, I'd like to ask you a couple questions. I said, I already know the answers, but I've been gone for 5 years. I'd like to know if certain things are still the way they were when I left. I said, now I'll have to explain some of this when I'm done, because you're not going to understand it all unless you know something about music. I said, do they still take the master to the temple room? Dave said, yeah. I said, do they still have the coven conjure demons into the master? He said, of course. I said, now, I got to know something. What's the main reason for rock music? He said, come on, Lance, you know what the reason is. I said, please, David, I don't want to guess. Tell me what the main reason is. He says, the same as when you were in, so that we can play spells on people that we couldn't cast spells upon. I'll explain what that means in a minute. I said, okay, one last thing. I've been hearing that you must be an initiated witch now to get a record contract. He said, that's right. He says, many of us that weren't total witches have to be witches now in order to produce music. I said, thank you. The master is a tape about as big as the top of this podium that looks like an overgrown 8-track that the album is cut on and is placed in a machine that produces and presses the records and the 8-tracks and cassettes that you buy. After it's been recorded, it's taken in. This is why a master's cut months in advance before it's released. On the full moon, it's taken in to a temple room about the size of this auditorium that is in every one of the major music companies, behind locked doors up in the executive offices. And it's placed on an altar sitting in the north of the room and a pentagram engraved in the floor. And 13 hand-chosen witches and wizards and a coven come in and conjure a principality or a power up, usually Regia or something like that, and order him to tell the demons under him to follow every record and every tape coming off of that master. As I tell many Christian parents, you can go home and count your kids' records, probably yours too, and count how many demons at least are there. If that's too hard for you to believe, I'm sorry. That's why they do it. Now listen to me. This is why rock music's addicting. Have you ever seen kids that got rid of their music? They go around like this. They can't wait to find a rock station somewhere and they sneak off just like getting a cigarette or a fix because it's addicting. That's why they can't give it up. The rest of the conversation was this. You can't cast a spell on a Christian, but you can get a Christian to cast a spell on themselves. If you give the permission for the spell to work, being a Christian won't block it. And rock music is not just a song. It is supernatural music that which is carefully designed by their spirit guides or familiar spirits in the form of spells. Now, although the devil's music's power is the music and God's music is the words, much of the songs are written in what we call witch language. Give you kind of an idea. Many of you talk on a CB, unless you know what a smoky is, and a 10-4, and a front door and back door and rocking chair and these type of things. You don't know what you're talking about. Same with witches. When you're in the first and second level, you have to learn over 2,000 words that said by anybody else means something totally different than when you say them. Elton John has said he's never written a song or sung a song that wasn't in witch language. Now I want to show you something. See how many kids in here will be honest and adults. How many remember and have heard at least several times a song called Hotel California? Somebody tell me what it meant. Quickly, somebody tell me what it meant. Huh? That's pretty close. But from the words, what did it mean? Well, that's more of a guess. See, most people can't tell you. That's why when people do drugs and they listen to songs in which language, they get some of the meaning. But most of the time, they can't tell you. Stop and think how many songs are out there that you really like, and you don't have any idea what the person was talking about. Beyond the Yellow Brick Road? How about The Destroyer by Kiss? Can anybody tell me what it's about? Kiss said in it, kids, kill your parents. They're talking about Helter Skelter. Beatles sung Helter Skelter in which language? Nobody knew what it meant. Manson did because he belongs to the process. Helter Skelter is a several thousand-year-old word. Most of the music is either about Helter Skelter or a place called the Night Winds, which is what Hotel California is about, and different doctrines of witchcraft. You listen to them, your parents let you listen to them, and they have no idea. Kiss openly bragged how they were gaining control of people through their music because the people played their music. They told how they didn't form their own group. Their church, because they were ordained ministers of the Satanist church, placed them together. And that's how most of the music is done. David Crosby, when him and Crosby, Still, Nash & Young produced the record Two-Way Street, they ordered the Principality of Medici to order Demons of Rebellion to go into the record, and everybody that heard it would be rebellious against law and order and government. And it was one of the reasons for the great upheaval in the 60s was that one album, and they take open credit for it.
I have personally talked with Johnny Todd on the basis of Jack Chick's recommendation. Having known Johnny Todd now for more than 4 years, and my having known him for some 6 months, I believe that Johnny Todd is a genuinely converted man, saved by the grace of God out of the depths of Satan.
What's the point of music? Niggas don't know. It's not always to have fun. It's not always to have fun. Sometimes it's to help people find themselves, because music is frequency programming. Music is frequency. What frequency are you being fed? I will hope a motherfucker, before they go pull some negative shit out this conversation, they pull this part of the conversation, and then see that I'm really actually helping people, bro. Let me be detailed. At 15 years old, I was doing sound engineering, so I was playing with frequency. I was playing with equalizers. Now, I think it's it's not a sonar wave. I forgot. It's like an alpha wave or a sonar wave or something like that. I figured out that hertz is to understand the frequency vibration, right? So there's kilohertz. There's hertz, kilohertz, megahertz, right? And then I think it's ultra hertz. If I play with those frequencies, right, I can target certain parts of the mind, target the frequency to go to certain parts of the mind, and I can literally, like, if I want you to astral project, right? You know what astral projection is? No. If I want you to astral project, or if I want you to go to sleep, or if I want you to go into a meditative state, I can make my music do that.
This next series of photographs are the work of Japanese researcher Mr. Masaru Emoto from his book, The Message from Water. Mr. Emoto's work provides factual evidence that human vibrational energy, thoughts, words, ideas, and music affect the molecular structure of water. Please remember that water comprises over 70% of a mature human body and covers the same amount on our planet. Water is the very source of all life. This photo shows the beautifully formed geometric design of the Yushi Spring water. This next photo is from the Shimanto River, the last clean spring in Japan. Notice the extraordinary geometric forms. The fact that the molecular structure of water can be affected by our consciousness, our intent, and our sounds is extremely important. This photo is from the Mount Cook Glacier in New Zealand. Mr. Emoto has been visually documenting these molecular changes in water by means of his photographic techniques. He freezes droplets of water, then examines them under a dark field microscope that has photographic capabilities. His work clearly demonstrates the diversity of the molecular structure of water and the effects of the environment upon the structure of the water. This photo is from the fountain in Lourdes, France. This photo is from contaminated water from the Yodo River in Japan. In this photo, we can compare the contaminated water with clean stream water. Look at the difference. Mr. Emoto decided to see what effects music would have upon the structure of water. He placed distilled water between two speakers for several hours while playing different music and then photographing the crystals that formed after the water was frozen. This photo is of water being exposed to Beethoven's Pastorale. This photo is the effect of Bach's Air for the G string on the water. This photo is water exposed to Chopin's Farewell Song. This next photo is water being exposed and affected to music that was designed for healing. This photo is of water being exposed to the Kawachi folk dance. This photo shows the effect of heavy metal music upon the water. Here now we can compare the effects of healing versus heavy metal music and what happens to the water molecules. Mr. Emoto decided to see how thoughts and words affected the formation of untreated distilled water crystals by typing words onto paper and then taping this paper onto glass bottles overnight. This photo shows the effects of the words, "Thank you." This next photo shows the effects of the words, "love and appreciation." This photo shows the effects of the words, "You make me sick, I will kill you." And here we can compare the effects of "thank you" with the "you make me sick, I will kill you." Very, very different geometric forms being incurred through the intention. Now this photo is of a very polluted and toxic water from the Fujiwara Dam. Here now is the same water from the Fujiwara Dam after a Buddhist monk had offered a prayer over it. Prayer, that sound coupled with intention, seems to have an extraordinary ability of restoring water to its natural, harmonious, geometric symmetry. And in this photo we can compare the toxic water and then the effects of praying over the water.
first experiment for the cymatics music video is called a Chladni plate. Now, Chladni plate's basically a metal plate attached to the top of a speaker. There's sand on top of the plate, and you play different tones through the speaker. The plate vibrates, which forms different shapes depending on the frequency of the sound.
Well, we blew up a lot of speakers with the Chladni plate. So there was a lot of experimenting around the Chladni plate, primarily looking at how much volume we can put through there, how much sand to actually put on the plate, and the different shapes of plates and what different patterns would be created because of those shapes. But what we were really testing was what frequencies create the most interesting repeatable patterns, because that was a key point. So we ended up playing pretty much every audio frequency through the plate to see what different shapes it would form.
And for most frequencies, it doesn't really do much, but when it hits a frequency that resonates with the plate, it forms a really nice pure shape. So we found out what those tones were, and those were the tones we used to draw the plate in the video.
Let's look at Stairway from another angle. Let's look at it from the angle in which Satanists are looking at it and see what they're actually finding. Now, there's a few different ways to look at backwards masking, and there's different types of what people call backwards masking. I'm not talking really about backwards masking. I'm talking really about backwards messages. In fact, one way to do it, which wouldn't require demons or higher intelligences to intercede, would be just to take straight words, take 7 or 8 words in a song, and reverse them. And then when you played it backwards, you would hear those words. But when you heard it forwards, what would you hear? You'd hear something backwards. It wouldn't make sense. So when people talk about how backwards masking is done in the studio, yeah, that kind of backwards masking is done in the studio. No problem. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about when you hear music and lyrics forward, and then you hear those same lyrics backwards, and it's a message forward, and those same words are a message backwards. Okay? And we're not talking about 1 or 2 words. We're not talking about something like the cat and playing it backwards and trying to get something like tack backwards and something out of the. We're talking about sometimes over 15 words straight. We're talking on Stairway to Heaven right around 30 words. Okay? And we're not only talking about that, we're talking about a song that wasn't engineered to be heard backwards, but came right from the spirit world automatically. Okay? And then we're talking about if you wanted to make lyrics backwards on a song, you're going to mess up that song forward pretty bad, right? Well, Stairway to Heaven is the most popular song in rock and roll. So this destroys any kind of argument that comes against it. And what destroys it more is the lyric forward often has everything to do with the lyric backwards. And to take it even further, you can hear a lot of these same things on live albums backwards. Because it's the demonic spirits using these human beings. Do you understand that? So let's listen to it. Remember, first of all, that they were invoking Satan, that they've got it from Satan, and listen to what you hear backwards. First, we'll hear a little bit forward. Listen carefully. Raise your hand if you heard anything right away. Okay, that was without me even telling you anything. I've seen a lot of hands go up. Forward. Your stairway lies on the whispering wind. Forward it says, and your stairway lies on the whispering wind. Backwards it says, 'cause I live with Satan. Listen carefully. Raise your hands if you heard that. Quite clear, quite obvious. There's a lot more. Her stairway lies in the whispering wind, dear lady, just like the Led Zeppelin fans, because their power is Satan. They live with Satan. That's who empowers them, and they're following Led Zeppelin. They're really following Satan, because Led Zeppelin were just 4 puppets. Satan could have used any 4 and formed Led Zeppelin. It was Satan's music. Let's listen on. Backwards it says the piper's calling you to join him, or forward. Backwards it says the Lord turned me off. Raise your hands if you heard that. Forward it says, and it makes me wonder. Backwards it says, there's no escaping it. Raise your hands if you heard that. Okay, it's quite obvious, and it's quite clear. You'd have to turn your ears off to not hear it, okay? It's really obvious what's going on here. Now, there is an escape. It says there's no escaping it. There is an escape, and that's Jesus Christ. In fact, he's the only escape.
For as long as there's been music, Satan himself has been a fan. From the controversial Devil's Note of the Middle Ages to Robert Johnson's Crossroads, the devil has been dancing for decades. In the modern era, the music of Dylan, the Stones, and the Beatles was supposedly afflicted by hidden messages. These took the form of backmasking, the term applied to the simple act of playing lyrics in reverse.
I think part of that appeal has to do with like teenage boys and the product of a vinyl record. The physical object that you can actually manipulate. When you learn that you can move that turntable and it starts to sound weird, get that record and just spin it till you heard it. You'd find the right speed and you'd be going, damn, it did say that.
By the mid-70s, this ideology has taken on a life of its own. But how much of this is legend or just time-honored lore?
It's not only possible, it happens on a regular basis that you'll hear their messages. Demons deliver messages in all forms of electronic devices. Now, what is the purpose for backward speech? This is something that most people don't really understand. In my work, demons spoke backwards because they didn't want me to understand them at the time.
As radical as it seems, backmasking takes off in the 70s to the point where witch hunts against popular music take over. But why? For that, it's time to go back to the drug culture of peace and love.
It was born out of the flower power movement. In the late 60s, what we now call classic rock starts to get more excessive. Bands are writing songs about hobbits, wizards, and warlocks. All of a sudden, you end up with these crazy concepts. And some people thought that they were involved in devil worship.
The more you play with a cult, the more you're inviting this stuff in. It is feasible that demons will affect you and have you say something or write something a certain way because they're opportunistic and they'll do everything they can.
I think the reason people were so obsessed with the devil's music is really because in the 70s and 80s, there were references to the devil, to Aleister Crowley, you know, the Satan worshiper, in their songs.
Aleister Crowley, the occultist, he had a magic book and he encouraged magicians to do things backwards. walk backwards, speak backwards, think backwards, and listen to the phonograph backwards. So some would say that Aleister Crowley is the beginning or the seed planted for backmasking.
Not only do lyrics get darker, but musicians start using experimental techniques in the studio to enhance the experience. Unwittingly, the controversy over backmasking originates with the biggest band in the universe.
The Beatles used backward masking a lot. They used it in many, many songs. Rain was the first song, and then Revolution number 9, never guessing that it would help start the rumor that Paul was dead.
At the end of the White Album track, I'm So Tired, John Lennon's mumbling played in reverse reveals a startling message.
If you play it backwards, you hear someone saying Paul is dead forwards.
The Beatles start, sort of, manipulating sounds, and it gets a little eerie and scary there. Black Sabbath shows up out of nowhere playing this like demonic, British blues. And then later down the line, Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin buys Aleister Crowley's castle, and we just think that we're being inundated with Satan at this point.
Page's purchase of the castle in Scotland reinforces Led Zeppelin's rabid interest in Crowley and his musings. The band allegedly adds satanic references in their music, specifically on the album Zoso. So it's not a surprise when they're associated with backmasks on the seminal hit Stairway to Heaven.
Led Zeppelin in Stairway to Heaven, it's supposed to say, "Here's to my sweet Satan," and 666.
Stairway to Heaven is sort of based out of the main vocal, so it's not anything that is sort of hidden. They would have had to have figured out what things would sound like backwards as they were writing the lyric.
While Led Zeppelin denies accusations that they're intentionally adding backward messages, the phenomenon draws the attention of religious leaders, and no artist is off limits.
Religious folks jumped on the whole backmasking bandwagon.
Suddenly, we were drawn into it. We were being accused of putting these satanic messages backwards on our records.
In January of 1982, the Trinity Broadcasting Network drives the fervor even further by airing a program claiming satanic messages are hidden in Zeppelin's hit tune, Stairway to Heaven.
All right, let's go ahead and start. Okay. How many in the audience heard that?
Religious folks were convinced that if their children listened to Stairway to Heaven, that they would somehow subliminally be programmed to do Satan's work.
Now, seemingly everyone's music, from Queen to ELO to Styx, is on a path to hell.
Styx were successful for years, from their first hit Lady and all those tracks, Come Sail Away to Babe. They were never considered a controversial group.
But suddenly we were drawn into it. I guess it was snowblind, yeah. At first we thought, well, that's ridiculous. But it started going around and it became, kind of national news that Styx was doing this. And you hear what it said, man? It said, "Oh, Satan, move in our voices." Oh, Satan, move. People were telling us that their preachers were telling them, do not listen to Styx because they're evil, they're devil worshippers. The record company, and A&M they were fine with it, they loved it. They said, everyone's going out and buying your album now.
So now someone wants to be able to prove that this is actually happening, and the only way to do that is to then buy the record to check for yourself. That was someone's genius, okay?
Styx capitalizes on the controversy by intentionally adding a backwards message to their follow-up concept album, Kilroy Was Here.
We decided on the Kilroy album, let's do an actual backwards message.
In the song Heavy Metal Poisoning, The words rock and roll is evil was specifically spoken backwards.
We were just messing with people. We're all good Catholic boys, the rest of the band. I'm from Alabama. I was raised up in the Baptist church. If we wanted to be Satan worshipers, where would we go?
You say he studies magic? What do you mean by that?
So, well, he wrote a great book called High Magic, which is, I think that's what it's called. It's a fantastic book on, magic is really the wrong word for it. There's an entire, like, mythos or religion that got sort of wiped out by, Terence McKenna talks about it a lot. It got kind of wiped out by, superstition. So witchcraft, as we understand it now because of Hollywood, is like, ladies riding around on brooms and shit. But it just used to be midwifery. It used to be like healing women who would like deliver babies and stuff. But these were all connected to, they all had pagan roots. And so essentially you can follow back this branch of data that some people say started in Sumeria or Egypt, ways of meditating, ways of connecting with the universe that are ritualistic in nature, but seem mysterious to us because even though, like, if you want to see what it looks like, just look at a Catholic Mass. You're looking at a ceremony. It's theurgy, I guess you'd call it. That is a magical ceremony where bread gets converted into the flesh of a god that you eat. So they're all wearing robes, they're burning incense. So that is magic. That's what ceremonial magic looks like. It's non-different from ceremonial magic. Someone in the Catholic Church might tell you, this isn't magic. This is me praying to the infinite and asking for forgiveness. That's magic. You're connecting with a divine intelligence. You're hoping from your connection with the divine intelligence to produce some change in your own psychology, in your own life, and maybe create good fortune or whatever it is you're praying for, healing, whatever it may be. That's magic. So magic is that, and that I'm not saying the Catholicism would necessarily be considered a branch of magic. But I mean, one of the things he said in this interview is, like, if the Bible is one of the most powerful magical grimoires there is, I mean, you read that shit, if you really look in it, there's all kinds of bizarre stuff that doesn't seem to make it onto Christian radio.
Like what?
Well, like when in the book of Genesis, it's why do they refer to themselves as a plurality? When God's talking, it's not like when they're saying, like, why do we throw Adam and Eve out of the garden? It's we. If we don't do something about this, they will become like us. There's a plurality that's being mentioned there. And so what is that plurality? So throughout the Bible, there's mentions of angels. The book of Ezekiel, the famous one that ufologists go to, there's all these contacts with angels, hyperdimensional beings that have some data set they want to bring to the world. Quite often, depending on what book you're in, it's some terrifying prophecy about the end of the world that's coming. But sometimes it's, some message of hope or some message of healing. So you could say magic is a non-Christian oriented method for connecting with those various entities using ritual. That's one branch of it. Now, I'm not saying, by the way, these beings exist or don't exist, but you could say, if you wanted to get like psychological, you could say we have buried inside of us archetypes, bits of the collective that are buried deep inside of us, and that there are ways to connect to these little fragments of the collective mind. And, many people have their own method for doing that. One of the methods to do that might be doing a ritual. And for a moment, allowing yourself to imagine that you're trying to talk to an extra-dimensional being. Aleister Crowley famously did one of these rituals and contacted I can't remember what the being was called, but it looks like a gray alien. This is before people were talking about gray aliens. Will you look that up?
Did he draw it?
He drew it. There's a drawing of it, yeah, and it looks like a gray alien.
What year was this?
It's like the 1800s.
Aleister Crowley was in the 1800s?
Yeah, right, 1900.
Wow, look at that drawing by Aleister Crowley.
Yeah.
That does look like a gray alien.
Yeah, man. And
That's what we're going to look like, man. Let's cut the shit,
Yeah.
right? That's what we're going to look like. Right, when you see people that are hairy and brutish, we think of them as being like closer to prehistoric man, right?
Yeah.
We see a guy covered in hair, he looks more like a beast.
Yeah.
And when we see people that are thinner and more slender, they become more a gentle version of people. And we associate that oftentimes with intelligence. We directly associate intelligence with frailty. Right? We all do that. When you see some super genius guy, usually they're frail.
Right.
And occasionally they're badasses, but there's a lot of those super genius guys that couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag.
Right.
Well, Hawking's the ultimate example because his body literally failed him while he was coming up with his greatest discoveries.
Yeah.
So this is our future. We're going to have big heads. They're gonna fucking CRISPR your way into a head that lets you live in any dimension you want at any time. You transport yourself from one planet to the other. Imagine what we've done with our stupid monkey brains. Now imagine it was 150% larger. 150% more brain, and then incorporated all sorts of fucking electronics that let you interface with space-time around you and all kinds of other wacky ways of communicating we couldn't even possibly imagine now, just like people from the 1800s couldn't have ever possibly imagined cell phones.
Right. And this is the idea, is like, okay, we're going to go there. And then when we get there, the way we understand space-time is going to be different than the way we understand it now.
Yeah.
So what that means is, theoretically, you could connect or communicate with a being that is outside of space-time, which is a future version of us right now, using like various methods, DMT being one of the big ones on the planet right now, but also using other methods that are a little bit more precise. Because with DMT, it's kind of like you're not really putting in GPS coordinates necessarily. Some people do it with intention, like a shaman will do it like with intention and can, like, maybe you can connect through time and space to these things that are already here. Like our understanding of time and space, we're locked in, man. But like, so magic is like ridiculous on one level, as it absolutely sounds and is on one level. On another level is at the very least a creative technique so that you can sort of summon a dream state while you're awake with the intent of causing some change in the world around you using, for a lot of people, what would be considered a non-standard way.
Well, just in terms of your perception of how you view the world, you can alter that pretty radically. I mean, from someone who has an amazingly positive perception versus someone who has an amazingly negative perception, you look at the results.
Right.
Overwhelming benefit of being a positive person. Like
Overwhelming.
There's something to thoughts and ideas that propel you in a good way, and for having a good architecture, for having a good philosophy, having a good operating manual for how you view the world and how you act and behave. Part of that's you getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's what that is. You're like enforcing your ability to sort of dictate the positive aspects of your future. You're deciding to take action. You're strengthening your bond with the way you interface with current reality.